Okay, continuing on with voter qualifications, we're going to look at some laws put into place in the United States and some other things that that allow us to vote here in the US or keep us from voting for that matter. Registration. To register to vote, registration is basically the procedure of voter identification intended to prevent fraudulent voting. This is to also identify voters' other party preferences, because if it is a primary election, primaries are closed and you have to be part of that party to vote. So in the primary elections leading up to presidential elections and presidential election years, you have to be Republicans to vote for your Republican candidates that you would like to see run for president, and the same thing for the Democrats. It also provides election officials a list of those who are eligible to vote in an election. So these are reasons as to why we have registration here in the United States. It became common in the early 1900s. After that happened, we see a lot of voter registration and voters drop. Today, most states require all voters to register for any election held within the state. I believe it is Minnesota that they do not have to register to vote if they live outside an urban area. So they can just go vote. They don't have to actually register. A person must register when they do this. They must sign up with their age, their place of birth, their present address, and their length of residence. Okay, and registration is logged by a registrar of elections or a county clerk. These are the people who keep track of everybody that is registered to vote. They also are the ones to purge registrations of people who may have passed or have changed their addresses and no longer vote in that particular area. So they're the ones that keep track of all of this. You will remain registered once you register. You will remain registered unless you move, die, you're convicted of a serious crime, or committed to a mental institution. There are some people out in the United States that think registration should be abolished. They believe that the poor and less educated won't register, which is true. It is statistically true that these sections of people will not actually register to vote. The United States is the only nation in the world to require voters to register to vote. In Europe, once you are of voting age, you are automatically put on the voter registration list. So the United States makes it a little bit more difficult to place your vote at the polls on voting day. So where can you register? You don't need to write these down. You can come see me. I have the paperwork to mail in. You can go to your public library. You can go to any state or local government offices. There are a variety of events around election time that will help you register, or you can even go online, and I've listed the link below, to fill out your state of Ohio voter registration form. So the motor voter law became effective in 1995. This is a law that makes every state make it easier to register to vote. So there's 3 ways that they are requiring states to put their registration ballots out there for voting. All eligible citizens can register to vote when they apply or renew a driver's license. So, ladies and gentlemen, you can, if you don't already have your driver's license, do that when you go do that. Or if you are to lose your driver's license and have to go get a new one, you can register to vote when you do that. They must also provide for voter registration by mail, which I have those forms in my classroom if you would like to fill one out. They also have to make registration forms available at local offices of state employment, welfare, and other social service agencies. All of these 3 things are to make it easier for people to register to vote, to get more people out at the voting polls on election day. Literacy. Well, no one today has a literacy requirement that makes you prove that you can read or write before you go in and place your vote. Historically, we know that the South used it to keep African Americans out of the polling places. So usually and historically it's to prevent people from voting. So we know African Americans in the South were kept out of the polling places because they'd have to read the Constitution or a passage out of the Constitution and be able to tell a white person what that part of the Constitution meant or said in plain English. It also was used against African or Native Americans and Latinos out in the West to keep them from voting as well. Tax payment. So this is the poll tax. Most of the time, property ownership, or at the beginning, property ownership would prove as your payment to vote. So usually this would be white male property owners only. It eventually graduated that went away, but they added the poll tax after the Civil War that would require you to pay a special tax in order to vote. Mostly it was used in the South to discourage African American voters from voting, mostly because they didn't have the money to vote because they were extremely poor, and $1 or 50 cents may have been a lot of money to them back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So the 24th Amendment is added to the Constitution, and this will outlaw the poll tax. So we don't have that anymore. Nobody can charge us to spend money to go cast our vote. People who are denied the right to vote. Every state purposely will deny the right to vote to certain people. There are 4 groups. Really 3 big ones. Some states just don't allow the last one. So if you're in a mental institution, you can't vote. If you're considered mentally incompetent, you are not allowed to vote. And if you've been convicted of a serious crime, you are not allowed to vote. So if you've been jailed or are in jail, they're not going to allow you to vote. And then some states don't allow those who've been dishonorably discharged from the military to vote. So that's only in some states, not all states. Most of the time they will allow you to vote even if you have been discharged from the military. Okay, so now what I need you to do is go back to classjump.com and answer the question, do you think being able to read is necessary for being a well-informed voter? Why or why not? So you can answer that question or respond to somebody else's answer on the message board. This is a homework grade, so make sure you go and do this, and I will see you tomorrow in class.